Our second reading is found in the Gospel as it is recorded by Luke, chapter 10, beginning with verse number 38. Now, as they went on their way, he entered a certain village where a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to what he was saying. But Martha was distracted by her many tasks, so she came to him and asked, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and distracted by many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken away from her." May God bless the reading and hearing of this word, and may each of us hear a word in it that is to us and for us on this day. I have titled my effort this morning, "A Sermon for My Daughters." There's a little hiccup in that, a little glitch. They're not here. So you're going to have to sit in for them. First, I'll state the obvious. This is a pretty familiar story to us, this story of Martha and Mary and Jesus being in their home. But while familiar, most of us grew up, I bet, not hearing sermons which touch on the revolutionary nature of it. I'm not implying here that I'm the enlightened one and I'm going to give you the real scoop on it. In fact, I not only grew up not hearing the revolutionary implications of this passage, but I preached a few sermons which missed that mark as well. Now here's a garden variety interpretation of this story. Martha was a worker. Martha could get things done. That was her gift. She could make things happen. And with little warning, Jesus showed up in her home, and she scurried about, and she provided a meal for Jesus, his disciples, and the rest of the crowd that followed him in there. Mary, on the other hand, used the moment not to make preparations, but instead to sit at Jesus' feet and learn. The text doesn't say so, but we often assume that she was listening prayerfully and that this prayerful posture of learning was her gift. Now, in this reading, the moral of the story points to the reality that everyone has gifts, like Mary and Martha, and that those gifts are needed, all of them, especially in the life of the church. That's a nice story, isn't it? It's an excellent story. You have gifts, you have gifts, and you have gifts, and I have gifts. And they're all needed. And when we mix them together in some sort of gift stew, we end up with all we need to do the work that we've been called to do. That is such a nice story. There's nothing revolutionary about that. It's like a cup of milk and some chocolate cookies. It's comforting. There's nothing there to get Jesus in trouble. And as for me, I could go to any pulpit, anywhere, and preach that, and some people might go to sleep, but those that stayed awake, they'd feel comforted when I was finished. Everybody would feel good. Milk and cookies. So comforting. You see, I missed the revolutionary status or nature of this passage for years and years. And the first thing I had to do was to figure out why I was missing it. I missed it because I didn't need a revolution. A revolution changes things. A revolution changes the status quo. Revolution changes the system. And the system was working fine for me, let me tell you. After all, I'm white, and I'm straight, and I came from a family which not only encouraged me to get an education, but they had the means to help me to achieve and education, which in turn opened up doors for me to engage in a career which allowed me to do as well or better than my family of origin. So, I'm white, and I'm straight, and I'm upper middle class and educated, and there's something else. Or something else. I'm a man. With all the things going for me, I didn't need a revolution. The system worked just fine for me. When I announced that I was going into vocational ministry, my mom called all her friends and said, "Guess what? My son is going to be a preacher, my son Phil." And they said, "You must mean his older brother Blake, because we know Phil." But once they cleared that confusion up, they all celebrated with my mom, and they encouraged me, and they supported me. The system was working for me just fine. I didn't need any sort of revolution. I was empowered to make any choice I wanted to make regarding my life and my future. And all of this meant for years and countless sermons on this passage, I didn't see the revolution because I didn't need a revolution. Let's look a little deeper, though, and see what we see this morning. We must start with the word honor. Now, honor means something to us in our world, but in the ancient Mediterranean world, honor meant everything. If you had honor and your family had honor, then you had everything. If you lost that honor, it was a tragic thing. Now, men acquired honor by the work that they did with their hands and the learning and teaching that they could do with their minds. So from the time they were just little boys, they were encouraged to develop skills which involved their hands and their minds. That was their place. That was their sphere. That was what was expected of them. In the same world, however, women gained their honor by the care they provided their household. That was no small honor at all. From the time they were little girls, they were encouraged to develop the gifts which allowed them to achieve honor in their home. Martha was a perfect example of a woman who understood this. But then there was Mary. There was something about Mary and what she was up to. You see, women were not supposed to sit at the feet of the rabbi and learn. That was a man's place. So by the standards of her day, Mary was misbehaving. You might even say, and Martha, her own flesh and blood sister, said at first, she was being a bad woman. Well, this isn't necessarily the beginning of a revolution, just so long as somebody puts her back in her place before she starts influencing other people. And as fate would have it, there was a well-known rabbi right there in the home who could get her straightened out. Surely Jesus would put her gently back into her place, the place that belonged to her in their world. He of all people would know chapter and verse all of the teachings that would support this worldview. He would know customs and mores which supported these gender stereotypes. But they weren't just gender stereotypes. They were the ways of being which helped to hold the world that they knew together as it was. Surely Jesus would, as we put it, get her right. Or would he? Here's the revolution, daughters of mine. Not only does Jesus not get her right, he applauds her decision to choose her own path. And I firmly suspect that he inspired that decision. But one thing is absolutely certain. He defended her and her right to choose her own path for her life. He even goes as far as to say this, that making that choice was the one thing needed of her. He inspired her, he affirmed her, and he empowered her to choose a path for her life, even as her world, her religious institution, and her own family tried to stand in her way. So if we want Jesus to be the center of our faith, we best have our eyes open to the reality that Jesus is a revolutionary, and when he visits our home, he doesn't leave the status quo in place. I'm going to finish my sermon by quoting 3 women. That seems right. The first one is Sarah Dillon Brewer, whose commentary on this passage helped me many years ago to see the revolution that I was missing. Hear these words, daughters of mine. Here's what she wrote about this passage. The message is not that study with a rabbi always trumps housework. It's not that women's work is inferior to men's, and you'd have to be smoking something potent and probably illegal to think that gender roles were established by God and are blurred at our own spiritual peril. The message is that we may end up and often are called to relinquish roles, identities, and patterns of behavior that feel tried and true or even immutable, not only for the sake of growing in our discipleship, but to invite others to do the same, even or especially others who seem perfectly happy with the privileged role they've got, to become more fully who they are in Christ and to live more fully into the ministry in which Christ calls them. The second one, I quote quite often, best-selling author Anne Lamott. And I've used this one before, but it just fit. Hear this, daughters of mine. In 2003, she gave the commencement address at California, Berkeley. She started out by saying and telling the students and their parents that she had meant to graduate college, but had forgotten to. She went on to admit that she had gone to college in Maryland and dropped out when she was 19 years old because all she wanted to do was be a writer. She talked about all the crummy jobs that she had to take then. Jobs that she couldn't even keep because all she could think about was writing. Then she said this, I bet I'm beginning to make your parents really nervous. Here I am sort of bragging about being a dropout and unemployable and secretly making a pitch for you to follow your dreams, your creative dreams, when what they want for you is to do well in your field, make them look good, and maybe make a small fortune. She went on to say, however, in front of those parents who had invested money and time and worry into arriving at this moment of graduation, that their parents' dreams, get this, were not those students' problem. Here's what she said exactly. But that is not your problem. Your problem is how you are going to spend this one odd and precious life you've been issued. Whether you're going to spend it trying to look good and creating the illusion that you have power over people and circumstances, or whether you're going to taste it and enjoy it and find out the truth about who you are. Reflecting on this passage from Luke, I hear Jesus saying the very same thing. There is one thing required of you: to choose paths which allow you to live authentically and truthfully, and to make those choices even when the powers that be attempt to stand in your way. And finally, words from Mary Ann Williamson in her poem, Our Deepest Fear. I close with her words. Wherever you are, daughters of mine, hear these words. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous. Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about thinking about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is writ within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in all of us. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So, daughters of mine, choose your path and let your light shine. Surround yourself with people who empower you, who encourage you, and if who need be, will stand with and fight fiercely for you.